You are welcome to today's class. So today we are going to be looking at relevant costing. There are two aspects that we'll be looking at: the concept and also how to identify a relevant cost. So we'll start with the first one, the concept. Now, relevant costing is very important because it provides useful information for decision making. Aside providing information for decision making, just like management accounting does, it aids management in decision making. It helps them to make decisions about their financials, what next to do, and how to do those things. And we'll progress further. Marginal costing and decision making. Marginal costing, you already know, is variable cost. So variable cost is actually the addition of direct material, direct labor, and variable production overhead. Now, marginal costing is also used for making decisions because it does not consider fixed cost when costing. So it's very, very important because fixed cost cannot be changed when incurred. So in that regard, marginal cost is used for decision making. They will now look at relevant costing and decision making. How does it affect decision making? What's relevant costing? So these are things we are going to be looking at. I hope you're there. Okay, now in assessing every financial and economic decision of every company, relevant cost should be adopted for that assessment. Therefore, a relevant cost is a cost. Therefore, a relevant cost is a future cash flow that will arise as a direct consequence of making a decision. Now you can see this. A relevant cost is a future cost cash flow that will arise, that will be incurred as a direct consequence of making a decision. So if we are going to make a decision tomorrow, and any cost that will arise as a result of making that decision tomorrow is a relevant cost. Ordinarily, there are items that are without prejudice or arguments termed relevant cost. Those things are what we say they are, which is variable cost. You see, variable cost is a relevant cost. So anywhere you see variable cost, you deem it as what? A relevant cost. Now, what relevant cost is not? Relevant cost is not any cost that had arose in the past. For example, so relevant cost is not a cost that would definitely arise. It's not a cost that will definitely arise whether a decision is taken or not. For example, unavoidable cost. Relevant cost is not a depreciation cost. You understand? And non-notional cost, as the case may be. Notional cost, as the case may be. Now, terms using relevant cost, I will be very brief here. Now, the first one is incremental cost. Incremental means additional. So any additional cost that will arise as a result of making a decision is making a decision to produce a product or to do a work is irrelevant, is incremental cost. And incremental costs are usually relevant cost. Differential cost. This is a cost by which the future cost will be different from the old one, depending on which course of action is taken. And differential costs are relevant costs. Avoidable and unavoidable costs. Avoidable costs are costs that will be saved depending whether a decision is taken or not. So avoidable cost is a relevant cost. Unavoidable cost is a cost that will be incurred anyway. So whether we take a decision, we will still incur it. Whether we don't take a decision, we will still incur it. You understand? It's just like paying of school fees. So where you have kids that you want to pay their school fees, and you are making a decision whether to build a house or not. You understand? Building a house or not building a house does not stop you from paying your children's school fees. So such fee is an unavoidable cost and it's not a relevant cost. So we move down to committed cost. Committed costs are costs that arose as a result of obligation. So whether you take a decision today or not to do or not to do, you must meet your obligation. So obligated costs are committed costs, and committed costs are sunk costs. So cost of constructing a canal is actually a committed cost and it is not a relevant cost. Sunk costs. Sunk costs are historical costs that have already been incurred. In other words, sunk cost is a committed cost that will not change no matter what the organization decides. Opportunity cost. Now, this is where issue arises. As an accounting or ICAN student, where you have a perfect understanding of opportunity cost, you will definitely excel. Now, opportunity cost, I gave in a detailed note and example which you will read up. This is the benefit that would be foregone by taking one course of action instead of the most profitable course of action. That is opportunity cost. It is a benefit that will be foregone by taking one course of action instead of the most profitable course of action. You understand? So the opportunity is what we call depriver. So you had opportunity to take a particular course of action, but you didn't take that most profitable course of action. Rather, you took another course of action. You see, you forgone the profitable course of action. Is it forgone? You forgone the profitable course of action to the least profitable course of action. Now, in accounting, we call it depriver cost. This depriver cost has deprived us of a profit, and whatsoever action we have taken must pay off what we forfeited. If it doesn't, it is not worthwhile. If it doesn't, it's not worthwhile. Now, to break it down, let me just use an example. Now, where I have a business. Let me say I'm running I'm into detergent industry, and in that detergent industry, I have carved an inch. I've carved an inch for myself in the liquid soap industry, and I started this business in Benin, let's say, and in the last 5 years I have excelled in this business, and Benin and its environs use my products. In fact, the demand keep on increasing at a geometric level every 3 months. Now, the management came up with a plan to move into another region, which is market development. Now, this strategy of market development was looking at southeast region of the country, and for us to achieve this strategy, we decided to build a plant in the commercial city, in one of the commercial cities in southeast, which is Aba. Now, when we built this plant, we found that there is non-availability of skilled labor that can manage this plant. Now, we have no option than to pull our skilled laborers that are experienced in Benin to Aba. Now, each of these skilled laborers earn a contribution to us as a company, and also we pay them wage. Now, if we pull them away from Benin, we will lose the contribution they earn for us. Now, for us to make sure that the option that is least profitable, which is pulling them to Aba, is evaluated very well and is profitable, the option must pay the contribution that we are losing in Benin and also pay the salary of laborers. If it cannot, it is not worthwhile. So you see the meaning of deprival. It has deprived us from making a profit. It has deprived us from making a profit in Benin, but must ensure that it gives us that profit in Aba and at the same time pay the wages of the laborers. So that is opportunity cost, and I hope that makes sense to you. You can read up the notes for proper understanding. Then how do you identify relevant cost? Now, the identification of relevant cost told the parts. The identification of relevant cost tows the parts of the elements of cost, which are material, labor, and overhead. There is no actual unanimous classification of cost, but most authors and accounting researchers have candidly classified cost using the word in quotes maybe into three, which are material, labor, and overhead. Now, when we talk about material, it includes direct and indirect and order and direct. Now, relevant cost of material. Now, when we talk about relevant cost of material, there are scenarios. Think about three. I explained and identified. I said, excuse me. The first scenario is none of the required material is available. That is, the material we want to use is not available. We don't have it in our inventory. We don't have it in our warehouse. We don't have it at all. In that regard, what do we do? What do we do then? So in such instance, we have to buy the material. So the relevant cost of that material is the market value of the material. Second scenario, where the required or needed material is currently held as inventory, there are two core questions to raise and only you can answer them. The first question, A, is the material in regular use? That is the first question. Is the material in regular use? If yes, the relevant cost shall be the replacement cost. Now, for example, I gave example here, but I will also explain verbally. For example, that we produce bread and we have flour in our warehouse, and this flour is in regular use. Now, a customer came around and said, a church came around. Let's say Redeemed Church is let me not use this, it's blasphemous in nature. A company came around and said, we are hosting a conference that we are anticipating 1,000 attendees, and we want to share a loaf of bread each to them, moderated loaf of bread to them. That they would want our bakery to supply that bread. Now, we now start costing what it will take us to produce this loaf of bread. We now ask ourselves, do we have flour? Yes. How much did we buy that flour? We bought it at 50 naira each. How much is it sold now? is sold at 75 naira each. So what is the relevant cost? The relevant cost is the amount at which it is sold now, not the historical cost. You see, I explained it there. Scenario 2, is the material in regular use? If no, the relevant cost shall be the opportunity cost. I've explained the meaning of opportunity cost. Now, opportunity cost shall be the higher of net disposal value or net benefits from alternative use. Shall be net disposal value or net benefit from alternative use. So these are it, and I gave example, so that which you read up. Now we look at relevant cost of labor. Now I also created scenarios for your proper understanding and assimilations and applications too. Now the first question is, if labor is a variable cost and labor is not in restricted supply, that's the first scenario. The relevant cost shall be the variable cost to be incurred to hire labor. That is our relevant cost. So where labor is a variable cost, not a fixed cost, there are two types of cost, fixed and variable cost. So if it is a variable cost, the relevant cost shall be the cost of labor. Scenario 2, if labor is a fixed cost and there is spare time, relevant cost shall be 0. Read the example I gave. Now, third scenario, if labor is limited in supply, the relevant cost shall be the opportunity cost. I reiterated and reproduced the opportunity cost example I gave previously. Then we shall appreciate this when we take equation for a proper understanding and applications. Now, relevant cost of overhead. There are two functional classifications of overhead. The first is production overhead, and the second is administrative overhead. We have functional classification of overhead: production overhead, admin overhead, distribution overhead, and research and development overhead. These are the four classifications of overhead. Now, production overhead is classified into two, fixed and variable costs. So we are going to dwell on that. Now, relevant costs of overhead. If overhead is fixed, the relevant cost is 0. If overhead is fixed, the relevant cost is 0, is nil. If overhead is fixed, the relevant cost is nil. But if overhead is variable, the relevant cost shall be that variable cost. Now, let's go back to fixed overhead. If it is fixed, it is nil, right? Relevant cost is nil. But however, if the fixed cost is incremental in nature, the relevant cost shall then be that incremental value. Remember, incremental cost in the concept that we discussed is a relevant cost. So if fixed cost is incremental in nature, the incremental cost, the additional cost, the extra cost shall be regarded as a relevant cost. I gave a guide that you shall read up. Now, we will take these practical questions in our next class. I don't want to be wasting a lot of time. So I want you to, anytime you're having my class, it's not going to take a lot of time. So in our next class, we'll take this question 1, question 2, then you solve the rest for yourselves. So thank you for attending and do have a nice night.